As you know, we're meeting virtually because of the COVID virus, so we're all in this boat together. We haven't had a regular meeting since the 27th of February as a chapter. The board did meet July 29th and came up with some plans for this year or future speakers. Thus far, we have Craig. He's going to be doing a presentation. Has the weather become more severe? That was something that was supposed to happen last year. That will be happening soon. Dr. Castigita, he was supposed to present last year, but I'm sure he will be here in the future on his father's work on tornadoes. And then Court is doing, he's going to do a presentation on tornadoes that occur with non-supercell thunderstorms. Some other things we've talked about for the future is a presentation on the Great Lake buoys. I'm not going to mention anybody's names because I don't know if they've been addressed by this. Another person, actually these people are from, I think, the National Weather Service on EF ratings, rating scales of tornadoes. Another presentation would be on the latest computer models using the National Weather Service in forecasting. One that I will say the name is Dr. Greg Mann and his study about Hurricane Huron. So these are things that we've discussed. I don't know if everybody's reached out or if we're going to get these people or not. We're also going to try to get a presentation from the National Weather Service hydrologist on the high levels of the Great Lakes. And then Dave Chapman said he would be willing to do a presentation on his AMS outreach program, I believe, to high schools. Are you there, Dave? Okay. I originally thought it was Dave Carmichael, but it's Dave Chapman.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I have it as Carmichael in the notes. Okay. It is
yep. He sent me a correction, and I'm sorry, I should have sent that on down the line.
Okay.
Another thing we talked about is maybe a presentation on weather apps for smartphones, lightning, and the shifting Earth's magnetic poles. Yeah. And another one would be the crash of Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 that went into Lake Michigan in 1950. There's a book out about it right now. I just got done reading it. I think others have too. It's pretty interesting. So that's, I guess, all I have to say as far as my part. As far as when we're going to meet again face-to-face, that's going to depend on whether people want to show up and whether we have a facility. The school would allow us if they were in session, but the school's not in session. Since they're not in session, they're not permitting us on campus. So in January, February, if school's on, we can show up there. At least we can do there, maybe do part of the presentation like this too, so people who don't feel comfortable coming could also view it electronically. So that's all I have to say. I guess I'd like to turn it over to Court, and then Craig and anybody else who from the board that has a report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Warren. Hopefully you all can hear me. I might be a little quiet. So I'm just going to wrap up our summer forecast contest really quick. We had 5 categories, so we had 5 winners this summer. Bill Marino was the winner of the warmest temperature at Grand Rapids, which was 95 degrees. He was in a tie break with Linda. The warmest temperature at the Muskegon Airport was 97, and Tricia Derry won that category. The warmest temperature at Lansing was 95, and Craig Tomaszewski won that one in a double tie break with Tricia and Bill Marino and Linda Page. The number of days reaching 90 degrees or warmer at Grand Rapids was 17, which is above normal. I think our normal is somewhere around 9.
That's correct.
Yeah, my memory serves me correctly. When Linda Page was the winner of that one, she guessed there would be 18, so she was only 1 off. And then the rainfall total at Grand Rapids between June 1st and August 31st was 10.19 inches, which was lower than everyone predicted. So the winner goes to my fiance sitting right beside me, Kim Howell. She guessed, she correctly forecasted 11.42 inches. So we do have a forecast contest ongoing for winter, and we've had several people entering into that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people are in that contest, and we'll see what happens this winter. We're off to a slow start for sure.
Is that still open?
No, the entries have been closed for that.
Okay.
Court, do you have the winners and the actual numbers written up somewhere that you could send to me that I could put it in the minutes?
Yeah, that is actually on our chapter's website.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I sent that to Linda, and she posted that onto our website for us. So thank you,
Great.
Linda, for doing that.
Is that it, Court?
All for me. Yep.
Okay, Greg. Bill, do you want to do your treasurer's report?
Okay, so we have $833.95 in our account, which is $679.73 in the savings account. We had a whopping 43 cents of interest, and yeah, we won't go down that road too far. We have $154.22 in the checking account, and according to my calculations, there were 21 paying members in 2020.
Good.
So that's the story with that. Unless anyone's got any questions.
Do we have any other board members that would like to?
Did this include giving out the awards for the summer contest?
Well, I had pre-purchased the.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
the short answer is yes. I've actually got quite a few left yet. So
Okay.
we're good for a while.
I'd like to interrupt again. I'm sorry. I forgot. I would really like to thank Elena Dockler for putting this presentation together for us. That's really above and beyond the call of duty. Really do appreciate that. And if there's a cost for her to do this, I think that we can cover those expenses.
Thanks, Elena. Charge. It's my pleasure to help out. Happy to do it.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Anybody else until we turn the floor over to Bill?
Hey, on the Facebook page, I did share a couple of like webinars. I didn't get this on. Do you want me?
You're there, Steve. That's Steve.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. If I'll start putting these on if we have more. I just with the first time I didn't know if there'd be glitches or anything. I just said, well, we'll let it go, and then next time I'll put it on our page and make sure it's on there. If that sounds good.
You know, your family seems to dominate these forecast contests.
I know they're kicking my butt.
Do we have a Facebook page? I don't even think I knew that.
Yeah, I put all kinds of stuff on there.
Ah, okay.
I try to keep in touches with some of the other chapters, and I share stuff back and forth sometimes.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything before Bill's presentation? I guess not. Bill, are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Well, let's go for it.
Okay, so this is our winter forecast for 2020, 2021. And what I typically do with these things is I look at how last winter's forecast turned out first. So we have some clue as to if anything I'm saying is even slightly believable. And then a side note to that, when as Weather Service employee, I listen to the Climate Prediction Center's long-range forecast they do once a month, and we can listen to it. They do exactly the same thing. They go through the forecast review first. They look at how the temperature forecast did, and they look at how the precipitation did, and they look at all the different things they looked at for those forecasts and how valid it was. And so, I mean, essentially I'm doing the same thing a similar thing that they do. So as I go through all of that, I will look at the factors that are influencing this winter's forecast. You have a temperature outlook, a precipitation outlook, and I have a snowfall outlook. And the snowfall outlook, I have to give some credit to Joe Cheroux, one of the newer forecasters in our office. He actually created the map for me based on the data I provided for him to create the map with. So that was kind of nice. We'll go to what the forecast was. So this is the winter forecast for this year. We have essentially an equal chance of above or below normal. And it's hard to say which is going to dominate. Actually, when I wrote this, that's what I was thinking. But since I wrote this, I think that warm is probably going to dominate. But it's still not absolutely for sure. Certainly December is going to be warm. I'm thinking January is probably going to be cold, and February is probably going to be cold, but we'll have to see how that plays out. The more significant thing about this, though, is that I think we're going to have large fluctuations in the temperature. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. For precipitation, we're going above normal. Now, of course, based on the way December is so far, you'd really question that since we're like amazingly dry. But I think we'll correct that. The upper air pattern, I think, is going to change, and we will get wetter. The trend in the last 10 years is wet. 70% of the winters in the last 10 years were wetter than normal. And La Nina winters tend to be wet. So that's the dealio with that. And then, okay, so, and snowfall, I was thinking that it would be above normal, close to the lakeshore and south through Holland, but near normal elsewhere. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So we'll go to the next slide. And so this is how the winter actually turned out. That's the thing where my mouse is over. Okay. This was my forecast. Whoops. That's not good. And this was Climate Prediction Center's forecast. I mean, that was a little better. But I don't think anyone forecast the winter to be as warm as it turned out to be. So at Grand Rapids, okay, we were 5.8 degrees above normal. It's the 8th warmest winter on record for our entire CWA. That's averaging about 50 climate stations across our CWA. So, I mean, that actually is a fairly robust number. The other thing I want to point out too is the way we figure out what's near normal, above normal, or below normal. We actually use terciles, okay? And what that means is you take the last climate period, which was 1981 to 2010, and then you figure out the coldest 10, the warmest 10, and then you have left the middle 10, and the thresholds between the two are what tells you what's above and below normal. So normal has an equal chance of as above or below theoretically. Okay, so there's no real trend in our temperatures in the past 10 years. 5 of the past 10 winters were warmer than normal, which means that 5 of the last 10 were not warmer than normal. What I didn't put on here was how many were near normal and how many were below normal. I think there actually were only 2 that were below normal, and the other 3 were near normal. And so essentially, again, what I did, I averaged our climate groups 5, 6, 8, and 9 to come up with this. All right, so here is the precipitation forecast. There's the actual occurrence. Notice how it was really dry in the West Coast, although it was wet right along coastal Washington. This was my forecast. And again, it didn't turn out so great. Although I did get to dry in California. Well, sort of. And I totally screwed up the Ohio Valley down into the Gulf states. I had it dry and it was actually rather wet. And CPC, I would say, didn't really do any better than I did. Although I did have a hint of the dry in the Gulf states, but actually where they had it dry, the dry was actually in through here. So anyway, it was the for us, it turned out to be the 15th wettest winter on record. And this is area wide again. We averaged 1.68 inches above normal. And so 7 out of the last 10 winters were wetter than normal. And for snowfall, on the left, of course, I have the actual snowfall. The 100 inches at Muskegon is actually one of our Kokoraj sites. And so, well, actually, this is our forecast. I'm sorry about that. And so again, I did horrible with this, right? Because I had all this above normal snowfall on the lakeshore. And actually, it turned out to be way below normal. And so it was actually very little bit of a lake effect signature even, because like Lansing had 45 inches, Grand Rapids only had about, 8 inches more than Lansing did. And Muskegon actually had 2 inches less. And even Scottville, which tends to be really snowy, only had 69 inches. So it was a really sad winter if you like snow. So now I'll get into this coming winter. And so this is kind of maybe hard to follow, but what I was looking at here is I was basing this on having a La Nina winter and having a westerly QBO. And so I listed 4 winters that all had that same thing, right? And so you'll see in 2005, 2006, it was cold in December, and then it was warm in January. And let's see what happened in February. I think we screwed that up. And also then in 2000, 2001, it was a similar kind of thing where it was cold in December, then it was warm in January and February. But then, this is what I'm thinking we're more in the bottom two here. So in both of these cases, 84, 85, and 56, 57, it was warm in December, but then it was cold in January. And then in February, it was cold in 85, but it was warm in 57. So, and the decadal trend, as I said, was for the last 10 winters, 5 of them were warm, 3 of them were colder than normal, and 2 were near normal. I guess I had that backwards what I said earlier. But so the colder was actually a little more frequent than the near normal. But in any event, there's no significant trend really. And we're forecasting a moderate La Nina, and moderate La Ninas tend to be colder in Southwest Lower Michigan 46% of the time, and they're warmer about 35% of the time, and it's near normal about 27% of the time. Precipitation is expected to be wetter than normal, and again, 7 out of the last 10 winters were wetter than normal, and La Ninas tend to have wet winters anyway. The one feature that's typical of these kind of winters, you tend to have periods of extremely warm and extremely cold weather. And we've seen that through the fall, where it was like really cold in parts of September and October, and then in November it really became fairly warm. And so far December has pretty much been warm, but right around Christmas I think we're going to turn to the cold side of things, and I think the colder weather is going to last into January. So we're going to have larger extremes than we typically see, and that's why it's kind of hard to say what the anomaly is going to end up being, because it's hard to say what's going to dominate the most, the cold or the warm. Okay, and so this is what CPC's forecast is, and I will admit this was last month's forecast, but they don't do December anymore, because it's already December. So their first forecast is now January through March. But in any event, they're forecasting above normal temperatures and wetter than normal. And you can see the analog years that fit for that. And I'm not going to make you read all this, but essentially all this says is that typically when we have the La Nina winter with a positive Cuba, we tend to have periods of extreme weather where it'll be really warm for a while and it'll be really cold for a while. So that's what that's about. Now we'll look at
Bill,
yeah.
this Steve. Do you think them wildfires on the West Coast had anything to do with the warmer fall? With they were such big fires and so high in the atmosphere. You think that might have played into it? I just wondered.
I think that's more a result of the pattern than influencing it.
I just thought I'd ask. Thanks.
No, that's a good question. And I don't know if anyone's any thoughts on that, but I would.
I was just gonna look up, I saw an article from AGU. They just had their fall meeting. Well, it's continuing on now since it's all virtual, but I did see an article that said, mentioned something about particulate matter from the Australia wildfires from last year were still being observed. Were still present in the upper atmosphere in the southern hemisphere, and they were indicating some higher snowfall rates because of that presence. So it's possible. I don't think that we could rule that out necessarily. I was just looking for the article, and I'll share it in chat if I can find it.
Of course, typically, of course, the particulates in the stratosphere would tend to make it colder, actually. In any event, well, so we'll move on here. So, as I said, we have a moderate La Nina, and according to CPC's call today, their ONI index, which is their El Nino index, is about minus 1.3 right now. So that's right smack dab in the middle of a moderate. And so what the numbers for moderate and strong are, so it has to be minus 0.5 to be a La Nina. To be a moderate, it's got to be minus 1, and to be strong, it's got to be colder than minus 1.5. And one of the features of this winter, which I just screwed up, is how far east this cold water is. And this was in November. If I had a chance to update this and put the current chart, it's even stronger, further west. Okay, so there is a really substantial pocket of cold water, and the water is fairly deep. The cold water is like over 200 meters in depth near the date line right now. So it's going to be a while before we can really get rid of this. What that does, of course, is it forces the convection to be a lot further west. And that's part of the reason we're having the kind of pattern that we're having. It's because of the convection in the Indian Ocean. So let's go on to the next slide. So it's just telling you the El Nino regions and what the temperatures in each of these regions were. And so back when I put this together, it was actually minus what, it was right on the border of a strong El Nino, actually. So it's actually weakened slightly, apparently. And here is the forecast for what they think is going to happen as we go into the fall, the spring and summer. And now, of course, this is made in October. The latest chart I just saw, which is made in early December, looks actually really similar, except that the DFJ, which is December, January, February, is at 100%. And January, February, and March is at 95%. And February, March, and April is more like 85%. And it's when you get into March, April, and May where it gets down to about 50%. And then for the summer months, they actually now have ENSO neutral is probable, like about 60%. So essentially what we're saying here is that this moderate La Nina is going to continue through the winter, and it will fade out in the spring, and then we'll have ENSO neutral during the summer. Okay, and this is just looking at another way to look at their forecast. This is some of their different models, and essentially it's showing you the same kind of thing. This shows you sea surface temperature anomalies as a function of time in the various El Nino regions. And of course, La Nina 4 is furthest west, and 1+2 is actually near South America. So as you go further towards South America, where you go from 4 to 1, you'll notice that the cold water develops sooner. And but in all cases, they're all down. Most of them are down around -1.5. So we definitely have a significant La Nina going on. And then this was the forecast for December, January, and February. And curiously, the current state looks very similar to this, where the coldest water anomalies are now actually into the central Pacific near the equator. So it looks like this is going to work out fairly well. And this is the typical La Nina pattern, where you get the polar jet kind of goes up into Alaska and then comes down into the central United States. Then there's a Pacific jet that seems to try to merge with it. And so what makes a difference in our winter is how exactly this trough over the central United States actually plays out. And another thing that's important to point out with this is, even though this is the average pattern, La Nina, this tends to shift quite a bit. So sometimes the ridge will be here, but sometimes it'll be further east, which is currently what's going on. Anyway, so what I consider for this winter is the moderate La Nina, the positive QBO, Northern Hemisphere snow cover anomaly, and the trend for both temperature and precipitation. And so this is a chart I made to show the impacts of La Nina. And in the first two columns, I have from 1895 to now. And the next column I have 1948 till now. And I just wanted to show you that the frequency of colder winters actually increases when you don't look at the winters prior to 1948. But the percent of, and of course, percent of warming goes down, but the near normal stays about the same. And I listed the number of years I put in those. So with that in mind, then in the last two columns, I separated the positive and negative QBO. And the positive QBO, which, by the way, I don't know who knows what the QBO actually even is. I should say a little bit about that. That's the wind direction in the stratosphere. So westerly wind, I believe, is positive, and negative wind is easterly. In any event, so it's pretty clear that if you have a positive Q, which is what we have this year, that the frequency of cold winters is significantly less than if you have a negative QBO. What I thought was curious, though, was the frequency of warm winters is actually about the same. And so what changes is not the frequency of warm winters, but the frequency of near normal winters. And again, I think that has something to do with these large fluctuations in the jet stream and these large swings in temperature. And so I think the 44% versus the 23% is that in a QBO that's positive, the fluctuations apparently tend to average out. And when the QBO is negative, the cold eastern trough dominates. And so this would actually go in the direction of CPC's forecast. And so here's a look at the snow cover anomaly. And for decades, I've been really hot on this snow cover anomaly thing influencing our temperature. But, and so this chart here is the Northern Hemisphere snow cover anomaly since 1967. And it's important to note, see the green line is what's normal, this line right here. And so you'll notice that almost every winter in the last 10 years, we've had above normal snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere, but we've only had 5 out of the last 10 winters that were warmer than normal, and only 3 actually were colder than normal. So I decided that there is, even though there's some correlation to snow cover and temperature anomaly, it's not significant enough to use in our forecast. But it's also interesting to point out that the center of the cold anomaly, where the highest correlations are, is actually in the Midwest. And so if we look at all of the CPC rated La Niñas since 1950, and what I've got here on the left is the temperature, and I've got the composite plus the trend, and the precipitation, I did the same thing. So this also goes along with the idea that there's a lean toward a warmer winter in Southwest Michigan, and the colder anomaly should be more in the northern Midwest. The precipitation anomaly, again, looks a lot like CPC's forecast, and really like my forecast, with above normal through the Great Lakes and into New England. And so let's go to the next slide. And here I just wanted to show you the temperature trend, just so I put this chart here, which is the same thing that I had here. And so on here we have the, again, the below, above, and near normal in the past 10 years. So you see the same thing I just said. You have 3 colder than normal, 5 above normal, and 2 near normal. But if you actually look and do a trend line, I mean a linear trend line, from 1995 to 2020, there really is no trend. I mean, it's pretty much a straight line. So that's the story with that. But the precipitation has definitely been a significant increase, which is, of course, part of the reason that the lake levels were as high as they are, because we had several, like 2 years in a row with almost constantly above normal precipitation. This drier fall, I'm sure, is good for people who don't want their homes flooded on Lake Michigan. But I do think that's going to turn around. In any event, you can see the wet trend. And you can also see that the frequency of wetter dominates. And here we have La Nina during the negative QBO. But unfortunately, when I created this, I kind of messed up. And I didn't put the slide for the positive QBO, which is what we actually have. And in the case of the positive QBO, this above normal line is actually out in Wisconsin. And so the 1 degree above normal, which is this orange, darker orange, is actually pushing into Michigan if you have a positive QBO. But it doesn't actually affect the precip. The precip anomaly looks pretty similar whether you have a positive or negative QBO. So it still tends to be wet. It's interesting to note that the wettest anomalies are actually near the lakeshore. So go to the next slide. So here is our snowfall forecast for this coming winter. And we did all of lower Michigan. And what's interesting about this is this almost suggests a northerly dominance for lake effect, because the heaviest snow is where the north-northwest wind would come on shore, like in Van Buren County, and then up near Grand Traverse and Towson and through that area. The other thing that's interesting too about that is notice this area of about normal snowfall toward Lansing and Flint. There's like this dry area right near I-69. And so this is just a way to look at things. This is the average snow accumulation for the last 29 years. And so you can compare what's normal with what I've got there. And so this area in through like Flint and over toward Ann Arbor, I mean, that is actually an anomaly. And I kind of think, again, it's partly a result of the more northerly dominance of the wind during winter weather events. But the other thing I think that plays into this is that we tend to have a southern storm track, which is actually what we're seeing right now, because Lansing, I believe, actually has more snow than Grand Rapids does. And I know Ann Arbor certainly does, and Flint certainly does. So this is a storm track, but also enhanced by Lake Huron. And so 78 inches, by the way, is near normal. The normal snowfall for Grand Rapids is about 75 inches. And then one bonus feature, well, I'll tell you the bonus feature in a second. So here's the bottom line. We're forecasting winters with periods of unusually warm weather, which we have been experiencing over the last week, and followed by periods of unusually cold weather, which we'll experience starting around Christmas. It's hard to say which of these regimes is actually going to dominate. I would say at this juncture, probably the warm is going to dominate. Precipitation should be higher than normal this winter. It's only been quite a bit below normal, and some of it's been below normal up to this point. But the other thing I want to point out is that in La Nina winters, the snow tends to be later, and the colder weather tends to be later. So I think that January and February are going to be significantly more winter-like than December was. And so let's see. So these are all based again on the La Nina winter having a positive QBO and no significant trend in the temperature, but having a significantly positive trend in the precipitation. And that's the end of that. The one thing I wanted to point out, and this is my little bonus thing, is I started looking at the new normals, 91 to 2020, and there's about a 0.4 of a degree increase in the mean temperature at Grand Rapids. And the precipitation, I don't remember what the exact number is, but precipitation went up about 2 or 3 inches from what the current normal is at Grand Rapids. So now if anyone has any questions.
Say, Bill,
Yes.
you had 70 inches of snow for Muskegon, which is below normal for them, right? Quite a bit.
Oh,
Your forecast?
yes. And okay. Oh, I should tell you a little more about that. Okay. So what those numbers are is if you go back to, I gotta find the right slide. Okay. So you see all these years here? Okay. So what I actually did was I actually got the snowfalls for all of these locations on this map for those years. And what this number is the average snowfall for all of those years at these points.
Based on the analogs, yeah, I see it. Okay.
Okay, so yes, and of course, one of the things that, and I'll be honest, that messed up Muskegon a little bit, and to some extent Lansing, but Lansing didn't have as much impact, is from like 1995 to about year 2000. I think it's only 2 analog years in that time, but during that time we had unusable snow reports from Muskegon. So there's like two analog years that are missing in the total. The other thing that screws up Muskegon is that the Weather Service was measuring the snow in Muskegon from somewhere in the mid 70s to like the mid 90s. And the Weather Service, when we were doing it, we were measuring the snow every hour. So that caused the snowfall to be quite a bit more. And then when they took all the Weather Service employees out of all those stations and they put us all here, we now have cooperative observers doing the snowfall, and they're not measuring the snow every hour. So that drastically reduces. So the average snow in Muskegon for 71 to 2000 was like 104 inches.
Yeah.
And they updated it in 81 to 2010 because they got some of those lower numbers in. I think it went down to 95. And I think, I have to look again, but I think if you did the calculation now, it'd probably be below 90. So, yeah. So
measuring the snow every hour would be the true accurate way to determine how much is fallen, correct?
No.
No?
No.
Yes.
Well, because I'm thinking the compression of the if you measure it once a day, I mean, doesn't it compress as it more snow falls on the first couple inches?
Yes, but okay. And so, my memory isn't exactly clear on this, but there was a case. I don't know if maybe Craig, you remember this better than I do. I think it was in Buffalo, or maybe
Yes. I think you're
where,
right, Buffalo, yeah.
where there was a cooperative observer that was measuring the snow every hour.
Mhm.
And it was one particular lake effect snow event. And if they would have allowed his hourly snow measurements, I think he would have had the national record for 24-hour snowfall. He would have beat what they had in, California,
Mhm.
in Silver Lake, or wherever that record is. So the weather service, and says you cannot measure the snow more frequently. Well, you can measure snow anytime you want, but you can't clear your snowboard off more frequently than once every 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that has really changed from when I was taking weather observations in the Air Force. That was back in the 60s, and we used to have to measure the snowfall every hour. This was in Texas. Because it was measuring, they said, how much actually fell. We were not measuring how much was on the ground.
Oh, and then the other problem too.
That was my question. That was my
Yeah.
question about what actually fell, not what's on the ground.
Right.
And another wonderful thing that they used to do too is, and they changed this rule, is that let's say it's snowing at 35 degrees for like 12 hours and you get like 1.2 inches of water, but you actually get no snow accumulation because the snow just melts. Well, in the old days, you would just say, well, 10 to 1. And so had the snow accumulated, it had been 12 inches.
Yes.
And we see we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Now you actually have to have accumulation, call it accumulation. So I have to say there's a lot of caveats with these numbers, because I did not try to, if I was a true climatologist, I would have tried to account for all these different things in the numbers, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't try to account for that.
That'd be tough.
Yeah, it would. I don't know. Maybe Jeff does that over in his day, but
Bill, do the observers still report snowfall increase 1 or increase 2, something like that?
yes.
You do that though. So you could have 3 hours, or say you could have 6 hours of snow increase 1, an inch an hour. But as you took a 6-hour observation, you may only have 4 inches of snowfall, which never made sense to me.
Well, yes, that's absolutely true. And actually, the way it works at our office is we have a snowboard out our east door, and it's like right near the sidewalk, but it's away from the building though. And what you're supposed to do is, and we actually do this, if it snows, and Court can tell me if I'm wrong. If it's snowing and we think there's 1 inch an hour accumulation, you're actually supposed to go out to the snowboard and measure it. And then we're supposed to call the observer at the airport and tell them that there was a 1 inch increase. And sometimes they'll actually call us and ask us if there was an 1 inch increase. But to be a 1 inch increase, it only has to actually be a half inch or more, right?
Yeah, over half inch, yeah.
Right. So you could have a 0.7 increase, and that would be a snow increase 1.
Did you hear, by the way, that in yesterday evening's storm, it snowed for a couple of hours at the rate of 6 to 7 inches an hour?
Oh,
Wouldn't you like to see that once?
Wow.
Because Binghamton had 42 inches. They had 20 inches in 6 hours in Binghamton.
oh my God.
Wow.
Was it thunder snow?
No, very little of that. Very little of that. Not much. It was, in fact, the highest snowfall amount I saw was 45 inches.
Wow.
Northeast of Binghamton.
I did hear that there was some thunder snow in PA yesterday or last night.
Yeah, a little farther south where the atmosphere was a little wetter. Yeah.
So
I love thunder snow. I love thunder snow. Sometimes I have to tell you my first experience with it, but another time.
Yeah. But
Well,
6 to 7 inches an hour, that's inconceivable. to me.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see
Yeah.
that. I love snow. I hate cold. I love the snow.
Yeah.
I remember a storm in Plattsburgh many, many decades ago on Christmas Day. We were getting 3 to 5 inches an hour. We ended up in 6 hours, got like 18 inches. And there was no wind. I mean, and it's snowing at 3 to 5 inches an hour. Even if there's no wind, I mean, you really have a hard time seeing your hand in front of your face. I mean, so it would have been amazing to see what that actually looked like, getting 6 or 7 inches an hour.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom.
So do we have any more questions?
So you're thinking it's going to start snowing in January?
Yes.
Okay, can we hold you to that?
Well, I mean,
No white Christmas?
oh no, I think we're gonna have a white Christmas. I think we'll probably start getting some snow around Christmas,
Yeah.
and that's
Not
a
much.
muddy kind of thing because, I mean, it's definitely gonna be cold there. So there'll be some lake effect, but the question becomes: is the wind gonna be too northerly so it won't fall in Van Buren County, or it's another whole thing. But yeah,
I'm not going to Florida this year, and I want to come by your house, Bill, and see your lights when there's snow on the ground.
okay, well,
I'm
that's
waiting for
fine.
the snow, then I'm going to come by and check out your the light display.
Well, you're more than welcome to.
I got
I'm
your
waiting
address. I know where.
And I will post some pictures on my Facebook page when it snows on my lights. I'm waiting.
I'm waiting too. I wish it snowed at like 52 degrees. I'd really enjoy it more.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
If
Hey, Bill,
anyone's interested, I did find the link for the article that referenced wildfire particulate matter and its impacts on snowpack. It was actually in MetTech International, and it was from an article back in August. So I posted that link in the chat box, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. Just click on chat.
I do not see chat at the bottom. Oh yeah, I do now with the number 1 in it. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I'll share my screen really quickly just so that people can see what the actual article is. And it's just a little blurb in a larger article that talked about it. So I found it to be interesting. It says that in the Southern Hemisphere, particulate matter was recorded on glaciers in New Zealand.
I wonder if you want to send that as an email to everybody in the club.
Yeah,
I
can
know
do that.
Craig does that several.
Yeah, because
several
I
times.
can't see anything unless it's emailed to me.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send it out in an email.
Okay.
And I'll share the, I'll try and post the recording of this, of our session on my YouTube channel, and so we can share that as well.
Just for the when we all email, we're all in the same email loop. So if it's South SWMI at AMS blah 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 at GoogleGroups.com, anytime you make some sort of a note in that, everybody sees that. Just for anybody's information. We have members that are great about posting stuff, interesting stuff, and post that we all see it. And I like it when members do find stuff that's interesting or even not interesting, but post it and keep that thread going.
And hey, Andy, do you have an announcement you want to make to anybody about what you're going to be doing soon?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can do that. Yeah, so I kind of, I gathered a love for weather back in 8th grade, and then I took physics for the non-science major at Hope, and I'm like, I am not going to do this. I'll stick to accounting. It's much easier math. But no, I'm going to do part-time weather observing, essentially augmenting ASOS at the airport part-time. So it's been a long process. I finally have my badge. I can get into the control tower on the 5th floor where we augment ASOS. But I think it's going to take like a bipartisan committee and 3 meetings of the Senate in order for me to get my badge to get access at the airport. So I had to go in and get fingerprinted for the second time because the first time wasn't good. So I'm hopeful that by next week, I'll be able to, start doing some, well, I don't know if I'll get shifts next week, but I'm definitely on the calendar for January. So, Court and Bill, I'll be calling you guys at the 6 hourly in the evening to get the snow depth from you. So just be ready because I won't forget. So
That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, we're ready for you.
Yeah.
all right. And I guess, Bill, I have a question for you, and that if you've kept track of any southwest wind flow lake events that we've had, it seems to me, and maybe I just not remembering correctly, but it seems like it's been quite a while since we have had a good southwest lake effect event. We can get lake effect, and even next week I'm still always skeptical because it's like, oh, we're going to get cold air, and I can remember that happening previous years, and by golly, we get cold air, but it's bone dry and we just can't get any snow out of it. Or we get a northwest, the flow isn't right. There's always like a ingredient that's always missing. We can never get everything to like come together. And I'm just wondering if you've noticed if there's been any decrease in frequency in southwest when we get 230 to 240, 250 degrees that come in through northern Allegan, southeastern Ottawa, western Kent County events like we would get, a few years
Western
ago.
Barrie County, that's the Southwest is when we get good snows here in Yankee Springs.
Yeah.
Southwest lake effects.
Well, I actually do have a chart where I keep track of lake effect versus synoptic. I actually don't keep track of, whether it's northwest flow or southwest flow. But I know we didn't have much lake effect last year. But I also know that if you really want to get a good lake effect event, what you need is you need to have a large low stalled just north of Lake Superior. So you get the west-southwesterly wind that's persistent. And I think it was 2015, and I might be off a year or two on that. We have like 50 inches of snow in 1 week. And just a setup like that.
Might have been 2014 in November, although there was a December issue when I think that happened. You're talking about 50 inches, yes. In 1 week in Grand Rapids, which was really amazing.
Right, and that was that kind of setup where you had this stalled low north of Lake Superior, and we were just getting little short waves that rotate through, and seemed like every day you get one system come through and dump at least 6 inches. But it was like a west-southwest flow.
And if I remember, that year didn't have hardly any snow prior to that also.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So I was kind of hoping that's what would happen. And it was actually, the weather was very similar to this. It was like really warm through most of December. And then right on Christmas, it it changed drastically. It went from being, like this to like that. And so I'm still hoping that when this changes around Christmas, it goes more like that and the models are just wrong.
Bill, in 2014, we had our snowiest month was November.
November, yes.
At least at my site here, I had 32 inches of snow in November. In December, I had 1.6 inches.
I remember that November 2014 very well because that's when I had my heart attack. And that was the day we had the heaviest snow of the year in Grand Rapids. And it took the ambulance about an hour to get me to the hospital.
Wow.
It seemed like an hour. My wife says, no, it's not. But they almost had an accident on the way in. There was at least a foot of snow that day. Nice fluffy snow without a whole lot of wind. It was great. I could have enjoyed it a little better.
Yes, indeed.
And that 50 inches in December of 15, that was at the airport. I'm on the northeast side of town, and I had about 2 feet less than that. Big difference. You could see it as I drove south on the Beltline. You could see the difference.
That's amazing, the difference just between.
Yeah.
If you go on the other side of US 131, I mean, because I drive home from work every day, it's pretty drastic.
I live about 10 miles west of 131, but as I go towards Hastings, which is more like 25 miles west of 131, there's a significant drop in snow between my house and town, typically.
I believe that.
Any other comments, any other questions or anything from anybody else? Do we want to close the meeting? Yay, nay?
Works for me.
Yeah, I guess. Sure. I'll
Well,
second it.
Bill, thank you very much for your presentation and all your work. And I know it's taken a while. I know you probably would have preferred to done this another month earlier, but at least we've got it now. And thanks again, Elena, for putting this thing together. The board will discuss our next meeting. Hopefully our next meeting, it will probably be the court or Craig. And hopefully that will be January, February. We need to talk and see if the school's available, but we'll keep everybody abreast of what's going on as we have tried in the past. So I want to thank everybody for attending tonight.
Well, we had a pretty good attendance, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill, that was excellent. Very good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Yeah, good
Good
night.
night. Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to all, and Elena, thank you.
My
Yes.
pleasure.